Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The X-Files Season 3 Episode 11. It's called Revelations, so spoilers for the episode. This is a weird one where I'm very kind of in the middle on how I feel about it. I think it's kind of trying to do some things that I like. That mainly being this idea of flipping Mulder and Scully around into Scully being the one who believes something and Mulder being the skeptic. However, the execution's a little bit left wanting, I think. Primarily because I think Mulder's dismissal of things feels just a little bit... And this has actually happened once or twice before, where Mulder's, when he doesn't want to believe something and he dismisses it, he comes off as a little bit of a dick, given how much he believes everything else almost all the time. And to be fair, they do have Scully call him out on it in this episode. She actually says at one point, you believe any light in the sky is a UFO, why can't you buy into this? I think where the line is for me, though, is the whole idea of believing that there's a bunch of stigmata stuff and biblical stuff going on in this episode, which I'll get into. I think the line for me is when she says she examined a body and there wasn't a mark there, and then there was, which in theory, at least to her, should prove that an injury has happened miraculously with no cause, right? Because so much of this episode is about this young boy who's going through seemingly stigmata, meaning he's getting wounds on his hands and his feet, exactly where Jesus did when he was getting crucified. And that's, if you don't know what stigmata is, that's what it is, basically, from my understanding. And any other injuries he got during that process. So obviously everyone's concern up front is who's doing this to him? How is this happening? Now the teacher who witnesses the injury in class seems to happen kind of suddenly out of nowhere, where he's all of a sudden bleeding with holes in his hands. But regardless, you understand why Mulder, Scully, the authorities are all like, okay, well, someone's done this to him, or he's done it to himself. And that either way, it's serious. We have to address this. We have to investigate all of this, and that's all fine. It's not like Scully's jumping on the "I believe" bandwagon at that point. Of course, she isn't. However, as it goes on, and various things happen, and we see more and more stuff, and the characters see more and more stuff. Scully eventually gets to a point where she's, one, examined a dead body with really weird effects where he's not decomposing the way he should be, and two, knows there's a new injury on the boy when he's been in their presence the entire time, and it couldn't have happened to him since they met him. And they examined him when they got him because he was in a crisis when they found him, so she gave him a proper look over when he was being seen to by paramedics or whoever, and knows that this big scar or this big cut on his side wasn't there before. So she says this to Mulder, and Mulder says, "Oh, you must have missed it. You're seeing things, Scully. You're seeing things. You're looking for meaning in things that aren't there." And I'm like, I get like his doubts for the most part, because I mean, as an atheist, I'd be pretty doubtful on most of this as well. But I think at the point where Scully is saying, "I have seen with my own two eyes, this wasn't the case, and now it is. Something weird is going on here. Regardless of what it ends up being, there is something unexplained happening here. It's not as simple as someone was injuring him or he was doing it himself, because I have now seen the evidence with my own eyes." And for Mulder to still dismiss it and try and write it off as, oh, she's seeing things, or she's missed something, she's made a mistake, just feels so annoyingly dismissive. And I don't think that Mulder's supposed to be a complete dickhead here. I think it's just the writing maybe not quite getting how he's going to come across, given how this has been throughout. And I think, to his credit, like I said, Scully does call him out on it throughout the episode, and the ending of the episode where she sort of like sneaks off to confession to try and talk about what she's going through, she does openly say in that final scene that she can normally talk to her partner, that being Mulder, about things she's going through and whatever weird stuff's in her life, but not this thing in particular, right? It's her kind of acknowledging that she's hit kind of a brick wall with Mulder here on at least this particular subject, for one reason or the other, and is kind of saying, well, that's not working, I have to kind of let this out another way. And her voicing her concerns, and this idea that if there is a God and he is doing stuff and no one's listening, that's arguably more terrifying than there not being one, that everyone's not paying attention to him. That's kind of the final sentiment she ends on. So I like kind of what they're trying to do with this plot. I like that they're trying to have her be the one who believes in something and for Mulder to be the skeptic. I think flipping that is a really fun idea and lets them provoke some things. And I wish she drove it further. I really wish she really went to fight Mulder on him not believing her when she's supposed to believe half the crazy shit he spouts out with and happens to be right so often in this show. So I think that's the fault with that core thing. Unfortunately, I think the rest of the episode is kind of a real mixed bag as well, where, you know, it starts with a big guest star. Arlie Ermy is playing like a preacher who's doing a very devout kind of, you know, mass or whatever. And it ends with him bleeding from his hands as if he's going through stigmata, and everyone's gasping in awe, except one guy in the audience who's kind of watching very intently. And the end of the cold open is this guy coming to his dressing room after the fact and strangling him to death, saying he believes in what he was saying, and then kills him. And the reveal after the opening titles, when Mulder and Scully are examining his body, other than the fact that his neck has like burn marks on it, there's also the fact that the blood that we see dripping on his white shoes, his gaudy white shoes at the end of the opening scene, isn't real, because he was rigged with a blood pack of some kind for the showmanship during the pasture. So I think I like this idea up front. I like this idea of someone hunting down people who are faking stigmata, or might even indeed believe that they are actually going through stigmata. But either way, that's kind of entertaining, because I think when I thought I knew the guy was like aware that the priest was faking it, I thought, oh, maybe he's like killing him because he's faking it, and he's maintaining the integrity of someone real going through stigmata. Or, as the case kind of seems to be, he just goes after and kills everyone who might be going through stigmata because he believes he is a soldier of the devil and should be taking out anyone with that connection to Jeebus or God. And it's like, okay, that's an interesting concept, and I like the idea of poking at this. But very quickly, we get introduced to the kid named Kevin, and he is clearly, at least the way it's presented to the audience from the very first scene he's in, is going through real stigmata, because the way his wound appears, unless they're being really cheeky with how they film it to try and swerve his later, it's pretty clear there's some truth to this when it's happening to him. And it's like, okay, so now this guy's probably going to come after him because he's got real stigmata. And whether or not that was going to be a mistake or not, based on what his motivations were, I didn't know for sure at the time. Clearly, he just does want to kill anyone who's going through stigmata, and maybe doesn't care if he gets some fakers along the way. Maybe he doesn't know if they're fakers. Because that's the whole thing. Like, Mulder later on, because this guy who's like a businessman, he's a rich guy from the South, he went on a trip to Israel, and apparently talks about how some people who make that sort of that trip come back with delusions of grandeur, thinking they're either saints or soldiers of God, or in some cases soldiers of Satan. And that's clearly what this guy seems to be. However, we are seeing him burn people with his bare hands, which would certainly suggest that there's truth in what he thinks he is. Or at the very least, he's got some sort of weird condition. Maybe there's nothing to do with Satan. Maybe he's just picked up a weird, deadly superpower somehow that he can't explain. But regardless, he's going around doing this. And a lot of this episode becomes protecting the boy Kevin, him being kidnapped, but turns out by someone who wants to protect him, because a lot of people, including the boy's own father, because we get into the backstory here, once the mother's called in after these wounds have appeared in class. And it turns out in the backstory, this had happened before, and it was blamed on the father, and he was abusive, and the mother kind of, made sure she got custody. The father's now locked up in a mental hospital. But the father was devout and believed that his son was important, and he was protecting him from evil powers. And that's what he still maintains when Mulder and Scully go to see him at the hospital. And this is actually the first time where someone, like, he kind of says something to Scully that Scully may understand, maybe because he can tell she's religious, he sees the cross around her neck, whatever the reason is. He does kind of like say something to her about coming full circle, which is actually the other thing that I really didn't like about the ending to this episode, is it tried to play the whole, that this phrase, you have to go full circle to get answers, or something to that effect. The priest in the confession booth at the end kind of says that to her, in relation to her finally coming back to talk in a church or whatever. And she has this shocked look in her face, like, oh my God, that's what you meant. Like, this was some kind of a prophesized thing that proves that there's some truth to all this. And the funny thing is I know there's truth to this. I'm a viewer of a TV show. I'm seeing the real things happen. I know there's some truth in this. Maybe it's not actually, God and Satan necessarily, but there's definitely real things happening. And I still rolled my eyes at this at the end, because it didn't feel like the gotcha for the audience that I think it was meant to feel like. It just kind of felt a little bit eye-rolly to me when he said that. I think her reaction being like, oh my God, he just said that phrase, rubbed me the wrong way, because I thought it was a little bit lame, I guess. But anyway, so the whole father thing was that he wanted to protect his son. He was kind of this devout, and it implies that there's more people who are wanting to protect him, more people who believe in Kevin being like some sort of chosen one. And it ends up being Michael Berryman, who's an actor I know from The Hills Have Eyes and a bunch of other things. He's in some horror movies and things like that. But he's the guest star here, who shows up and seemingly kidnaps Kevin. When Kevin's telling scary stories to all the other orphans, now that he's been kept in a home after the incident at school. And he talks about a bald demon from hell. And then Michael Berryman shows up and the kids all shit themselves, pretty much. But he takes Kevin to his place and explains that he's not going to hurt him. And explains that he's been watching him. But that part sounds creepy. But because of the context of what the father said already, you're kind of getting this idea, oh, this is someone who's clearly operating outside the law, but he thinks he's doing it for good reasons. He thinks he's protecting Kevin from the person who's going to come and kill him. And sure enough, when Kevin does escape, which is right after Mulder and Scully come and get him, because Mulder and Scully nowhere to come because the kids describe Michael Berryman to a sketch artist, and the mum immediately recognizes who he is, so they find him really quickly. But when they come and get him, he's already gone. He's went back to his house and he's home alone. And I'm not making a Home Alone joke intentionally because he's Kevin. I just realized that someone's trying to get in the house because the bad guy who's here to kill him is at the door. Kevin's alone. And in my head, I went, he's home alone. And then from that point on, every single time Scully in this episode said the name Kevin, it made me think of Kevin McAllister's mum because they're both redheads. So there was a lot of Home Alone. I was almost like, yeah, set up godly traps around the house, kill him with the power of Christ or something. Come on, do it, Kevin. I didn't get the scream of Kevin though. I was really hoping we'd get a scene later in the episode where Scully let out a Kevin, like that moment in the plane when she realizes she's left Kevin home alone. That moment, I wanted a Scully yelling Kevin in distress. But it's actually Michael Berryman who runs in and saves the kid at the house and gets killed in the process. The bad guy gets him. But there's a nice little horror sequence here. And this is kind of what I was like, I think when the cold open, I quite liked, and I liked how that ended, and I was intrigued by what it was setting up. And then we just straight up switched to a real kid who's actually going through stigmata. And I thought, okay, I'm not as into this as the faking of it necessarily. But then it got to this guy stalking the kid. I'm like, okay, this is some good horror movie stuff. This is stuff that X-Files does quite well. And this is all perfectly fine. And then, Scully does the autopsy and is like, this is strange. Why is he not, decomposing the way that he's supposed to? Why am I smelling something floral? What's with the burns around his neck? None of that makes sense given how he died. This is when it really starts to get to her, and she's starting to kind of think about it differently, and Mulder's kind of writing things off. And at this point, he's not necessarily in the wrong for it, but this is actually the scene where I realized what the episode was doing, that it was going to be her believing something and him being the skeptic. It would have been nice, because I feel like Scully's constantly challenged with her skepticism in a lot of the plots in this show. When Mulder believes something and she doesn't, she is challenged. She's faced with things where she has to really re-question her ideas and beliefs. And it would have been nice if Mulder got that too. And I'm saying this as someone who's an atheist, okay? I'm saying this as someone who doesn't believe in any of this stuff in any context. But I think for an equality in the show between the two characters, it would have been really nice if Mulder, maybe just at the end of the episode, saw something that he couldn't explain and maybe had to consider that Scully was right. That would have been nice, is all I'm saying. That would have been nice. But Regardless, the kid. I think this is where I also started to get a little bit frustrated with the structure of the episode, because it felt like the kid was like being just like carted around from character to character wherever we needed him. It was like, okay, after the school, he goes to this home because just in case the mother's been abusive, even though they don't think she is, but it's protocol. And then after this attack and Michael Berryman gets killed, he's just back with the mother again. And then it's like, okay. And then the killer comes after them that way. And it's right around here where they introduce another element, which I don't think they really do that much with. They make it clear that it's happening, but they don't really use it in a big way towards the end of the episode, which I thought they would have done more of, which is that apparently Kevin has now gained the ability to project himself to a second place in some way. Now, how exactly it works, but someone says they saw him just outside the home, but they also have intel that he's with the mother, and that doesn't make sense. And then when the killer attacks the mother and Kevin, when their car's like broken down, and he comes over and he gets really sinister, and Kevin does a thing where he runs away, so the killer chases after him, but then he gets out the car again and like helps his mom up, and it's like, oh, so yeah, he just pulled that trick. He just made the killer see another version of himself, but then he's still here. So he's got that superpower now, and it's actually one of the things that I like. I don't mind this idea. I just think it could have done with a bit more. And I think the last interaction he has with Scully in this episode, where she's saying her goodbyes and she's like, "Oh, I hope I see you again, Kevin," and he looks back all sort of knowledgeable and says, "You will," and walks off like he's the second coming. That annoyed me. Just because the kid starts this episode, the first time we see him in class before the stigmata stuff starts, he's literally throwing stuff at girls in class because he's a little shit. And that's fine. He's a kid. Like, he's fine. He's a little shit. That's okay. But the fact that by the end of the episode, he's supposed to be like, oh no, I'm the chosen one now. I'm going to say wise things that are ominous to people and walk out the room. I didn't quite buy that turn. I kind of chuckled a little bit when he did that at the end. But yeah, so he's with the mum now, and then then the mum crashes the car because she hit her head when she struggled with the killer, and she's dead now. So Mulder and Scully are here. So now the kid's with Mulder and Scully, and they go back to the kid. I feel like the kid is with different people and is taken or almost taken so many times throughout this episode that it became kind of almost like a follow the line in the maze. You're following this kid around as he goes from like group to group or person to person, place to place. I don't know. It felt really weird from a structural point of view. Maybe they just made the kid too much of a main character for me. Now I wanted to be more debating the ideas with Mulder and Scully, but I did like the death of the killer though, because ultimately the killer does get the kid. He takes him from the bathroom of the motel. He's clearly melted the bars on the window and bent them once they were soft enough, which Mulder doesn't really react to, but Scully's like, damn, he's got him. And she figures out, where he might be, which is this old, plant of some kind. It seems to be for disposing newspapers. I mean, it was a big shredder that the guy ends up dying in, and there was tons of stacks of newspapers for this shredder. But there's a bit of a standoff with Scully. There's a bit more tense stuff and sneaking around in the dark. And there's a moment where they actually do a fake out where you think the kid might be dead, because it looks like the kid went into the big shredder that's now turned on. But when Scully gets up there, of course, he's dangling over the edge, and it's only the bad guy that went in. And there's just a little bit of blood in all the newspaper shreds in the shredder, just to sort of sell the idea that he got mangled in that shredder. And that's a fun death. I did really like that. I like when they get a little bit creative with some kills or some almost horror movie type deaths. I'm into that. The other stuff here though with Scully kind of getting to this point where she is starting to question if she's been chosen to protect him, right, by God, because that's what Michael Berryman thought of himself. It's what the boy's dad thought of himself, and this idea that's maybe passed on to her. And her conversation with the priest at the end kind of got into this a little bit, where she's like, I saw these things but no one else could, is that making me crazy, blah blah blah. And the priest just kind of says, well, maybe they were only meant for you to see, so that you would do what you need to do. So the priest kind of backs it up a little bit, but in a vague sense, because he doesn't have all the details. So yeah, the last scene with the priest, like, I kind of appreciate what they were going for with it. I do like the idea that this is something where she had to leave Mulder to go and do, that this is something that's just hers, because it's, it's nice for a character point of view to have something that's not just tied up entirely in Mulder. And she pretty much flat out says that in the scene about saying she can't talk to him, but she literally has to tell Mulder, you go do the police report on your own, I've got something I need to do before we go to the airport, and she goes off. I like that separation and her kind of coming to this realization that there's some things that maybe she can't do with Mulder, and that's okay. She can have one thing that's separate from him. But I think it's just the execution is just not like all there for me. Like the script structure is just not all there. The sort of rubber banding of the kid going around to people, person to person, I was finding a little bit kind of bored of by the end of the episode, really, where I think once we got to the middle of the episode, I think it did start to drag a little bit for me, because I felt like we were just kind of repeating like everyone looking for the kid and the killer coming after him, and not in a way that was making it feel more tense, or in a way where, kind of like some of the better villains of the show where, like, some killer's coming after Scully and he might be here already, squeezing through the vents or whatever. Like, that stuff was really suspenseful. And I think maybe part of the problem here is that the killer himself was kind of like gone for a long part of the episode. And maybe that's the other thing as well, is that when Michael Berryman's coming to kidnap him, you kind of, I think, suspect that he doesn't mean him harm, just purely because we already know who the dangerous guy is. We saw him at the start of the episode, and he's been missing for, half of the episode by that point. So, I don't know. I feel very mixed in this episode. I think I appreciate some of the things that it's going for and what it's trying to do, but I don't think the end result kind of really capitalized on them. And certainly I don't think it was constantly entertaining either. It was kind of a little bit frustrating from I don't know, just from the story and how it played out. And yeah, so I don't know. Maybe it's the cynical atheist in me, but I think the idea of someone targeting people who were faking stigmata was more interesting to me than the kid who's actually going through it, which the rest of the episode ended up being about. I was looking forward to them having to go protect other hucksters somewhere else, like, oh, we have to go to this state because this guy's claiming to be a stigmatic? Is that a word? What do you call someone who's going through stigmata? But yeah, like, I think I was kind of setting up for something like that, and then instead got a kid who, yeah, let's be honest, I don't necessarily think I enjoyed the kid's presence all that much when he was in stuff. It wasn't like he was terrible, but I also didn't necessarily think he was like fun, or the way he was interacting with others was in any way particularly good. A lot of these scenes I was kind of waiting for it to get to the good stuff, I suppose you could say. So yeah, it's an okay episode. I don't want to be too harsh on it. I think it is trying things. I just don't think it's quite landing a lot of what it's trying, but I appreciate what it is trying to do. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the episode. Next time on X-Files, we've got an episode called, let me see if I can pronounce this, War of the Coprophages. War of the Coprophages. I bet I'm butchering that, but that's the best I can do at glance. Here's a description on IMDb. We are looking for signs of alien ships in the sky above a small town. Mulder learns of a series of deaths supposedly caused by metallic cockroaches. I did not see the sentence ending there. He turns to a sexy entomologist, Bambi, for help. Wait, what is this episode? Which makes Scully angrily rush to his aid. Wait, hold on. So, we've got metallic cockroaches, which is already wild. I'm already like, this is a crazy episode from that. And then it actually describes a female guest star as the sexy scientist. And then it says that causes Scully to rush to his aid. Is she jealous? Is she worried that Mulder's being seduced by some evil woman or something? What is happening? I am fascinated by what this is. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but I'm certainly interested based on this description. So we'll see what that's all about next time. Also, the sexy character being named Bambi is also kind of funny. So I'm game. I'm game for whatever crazy shit we're doing next episode. So let me know what you thought of this one in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership or YouTube thanks. Anyway, it's greatly appreciated. Thanks to everyone who already supports everything. Check out MailFuzz Movies for all the movie podcasts. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?